All right. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Company We Keep podcast. I'm your host, Jason Pearl. This is a podcast for everyday business owners, entrepreneurs, and leaders who want to think differently about growth, want to think differently about success, and want to find better balance in both business and life. This episode and every episode of season 3 is sponsored by John McDonald of Harbortown Financial Group. John and his firm work with individuals, families, and small businesses to build customized financial plans using their holistic, goal-based approach. If you want to contact John, all his information is going to be linked in the show notes on my website, jasonmpearl.com. Check that out to find more information about John. Today, we have an absolute treat for this podcast and for all of you listeners. I have a special guest. Her name is Espree Devora. I had an amazing conversation with Espree earlier today, and you guys are going to absolutely love it. But to introduce Espree a bit to you, let me just read through her bio and what this dynamic woman is all about. Espree has been a prolific podcaster since 2013. She is often known as the girl who gets it done, and she is an absolute force in the LA tech scene and the global tech scene for that matter, worldwide. She's the founder of We Are LA Tech. She also runs a podcast called Women in Tech, and she's a champion for women in the tech community globally. In addition to all of that, she's the founding member of Audio Collective, which is a hybrid live audio creator community. She hosts multiple podcasts, and she was the Clubhouse app, one of their first icon faces. She has been featured in tons of magazines and tons of publications, but to mention a few, she's been in Forbes, Entrepreneur, Harper's Bazaar, Inc., and others. And the best part about all of this is Espree has zero ego. We talk about ego today in this episode. We talk about how her goal is to lead and build a community of heart-centered entrepreneurs and building up heart-centered leaders, which if you've listened to this podcast at all, you know that that is what we are all about. So it is an absolute pleasure and delight for me to introduce Espree Devora to all of you listeners. So without further ado, let's kick over to the episode and hear what she has to say. This is the first time we've actually physically spoken. So, you know, you and I are like good old friends from back in the day, right? This is a new relationship, a new friendship that we have. And I followed you. I actually stumbled across you on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I just kind of liked what you were saying. And I was like, okay. And I told Emily, who helps me with my podcast, I'm like, you know, this girl's great. She's like, yeah, she's great. She's like, you should ask her on the show. And it looks like, no, she's got 35,000 followers on Twitter. What does she want to do talking to Jason Pearl? And she's like, no, you should reach out. And then she pointed out the tweet that you had. She's like, she's willing to go on podcasts, but it's like that imposter syndrome. And even like that, like, I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
I'm just this guy that's got, 26 episodes of a podcast. No matter what level you're at, it's just that imposter syndrome that you have. And it permeates every level because people could look at me, look at you, be like, look how successful these people are. Yet they feel the same way I do. That's why I appreciate so much what you do when you put all that good out there. And you've done like 1,000+ podcasts in your life. Like you're like a podcaster.
I can't believe that's not an exaggeration.
And so from what I understand, you're born and raised LA, correct?
Yeah. And I've traveled extensively. I'm so glad I've traveled too, because I think it's important. Like, I've traveled to places like Bosnia and Kazakhstan, and, you get to see like when there's a war, and we have so many liberties here that, we just don't understand. Traveling is important because you gain a lot of perspective.
In that perspective in life, really does translate to your perspective in business. It always does. If you are only worried about what's happening corporately in your work, you will have blinders on. But when you travel, it's perspective, and you have to find those opportunities. If you want to fully embrace life, you have to embrace the good and the bad of it, right? And it'll change you likely in a really good way if you let it.
100%. My mom gives me a hard time all the time. She's like, if only you understood that you were successful. I was like, Mom, how could you think that? You see everything I go through. How could you possibly think I am successful? She's like, don't you understand that you've done this and you've done that? And like, that is like unusual and awesome. And I'm like, don't you understand that I failed at this and I failed at that? And like,
Right.
I was like, you're my mom, you're biased. But when I think about being this word rich, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, I'm like, what is rich? Like, what is rich? And I'm
Mhm.
like, I've traveled the world. Like, with this pandemic, I've looked back on my life, um, because it's felt this pandemic has felt like for me like a life ending. I don't know. It's been very intense. Like I
Mhm.
feel like very dramatic. And the first thing I thought is like, oh, thank goodness I've already lived, right? And 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 I started to think about what has made my life nourishing, enjoyable. Like what looking back, has it been building the first action sports social network? Was it that? Was it traveling the world? Was it building a marketing agency? And so a couple things that really it wasn't being an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur has allowed me freedoms that I am not even aware that I have because I'm so like under the spell of like hustle that like most of the time that I've had these freedoms, I haven't even utilized them, So it's like,
Right. Sure.
so, so the moments that have made me rich have been travel 100%. And I'm like, whoa, I'm successful because I've traveled. That has
Mhm.
nothing to do with money. That's crazy. And the adventure of building, even though it failed, the adventure and failure is speculative anyway, because right now Sears and Kmart are going bankrupt. But does that mean they failed? I mean, they've been around forever. What is
Right.
failure?
Yeah.
So, and so the adventure, not not that I had that I not the accolade that I built the first action sports social network, like, it's the adventure that I got to experience building a tech company at that time in the way that I did, because I could tell you building my marketing agency was like, blah, like, no. I mean, I even knew that I had it for like a
Sure.
year and I was like, nope, not for me. Um, and even the community work that I've done in the past several years, I feel that it's been very purpose driven. Not feel, it has been very purpose
Mhm.
driven, but I haven't necessarily had a lot of life adventures with it. So, like, for me, rich is life adventures.
Mhm.
And life adventures aren't necessarily always to do with a dollar amount or
Yep.
not to do with a dollar amount. So it's just interesting this word of like rich. So for
Totally.
you, did it have a number attached? Did you know when you got quote unquote there?
So it's funny that you say that because I've been thinking a lot about that over the last few years and talking to people about that. And for me, I believe now I'm rich because I have had the ability to make decisions on my own and have that
Mm.
freedom. Right. And part of that is monetary, right? Because like
Yeah.
I used to think it used to be zeros, right? Is it
Yeah.
5 million? Is it 10
Yeah.
million? Is it a
Right.
million? Right? Like what is
Right.
it?
Right.
But now it's like I don't have enough money to go do whatever I want to do, but I have enough money to build my consultancy and have the freedom to not work on a Friday or
Yeah.
to schedule meetings when I want to schedule them or
Mhm.
go see my dad in Florida. Being rich is freedom and it's
Mhm.
enriching others, right? So
Freedom of
like
time. Yeah.
freedom of time and then enriching others, like being able to have impact in
Mhm.
time, space, and dedication to enrich others.
Mm.
So I run a high school ministry on Wednesday nights
Yeah.
and I had this like super life-changing event 3 weeks ago. I was the headline speaker at a like a keynote at a youth conference, and it was in the middle of the woods. There was
Yeah.
no Wi-Fi because it was in the middle of the woods in like southern New York, and I had the attention of 200 kids for two and a
Yeah.
half days. And I had 5 different speaking sessions,
Yeah.
and the amount of just like locked inness that was happening with these kids,
Yeah.
and how like they're so desperate for people to see them and see them where they're at
Yeah.
and then want to help them through wherever they're at and want to
Right.
speak good into their life. They were so ferociously hungry for that. And it like
Yeah.
changed my life because I was like, if I would have followed the dream of being rich, I would never be here. Like I would never
Mhm.
be here. And I guarantee you, and this is not egotistical, like I guarantee you that those kids, one kid in that room is going to remember that forever. And if
Mhm.
just one kid doesn't, it's like I was exactly where I was supposed to be.
Mhm.
And to me, like that's rich, right?
Yeah.
So that sounds fluffy. Like I've even heard you say that before. Like you're like, oh, like that sounds like fluffy to say, but it's
Yeah.
true. Like when you
Yeah.
feel it inside, it's true. Like it
To
does.
100%. No, 100%. And I've heard so many stories about wealthy people gaining all the dollars and feeling absolutely lost and miserable.
Mhm.
And so recently, I'd say it started probably a few years ago. I understood that inner ease was what I wanted to aspire for, like
Mhm.
inner ease. And then recently it's been my success metric is how joyous do I feel throughout the day each day. And I'm a work in progress. Like I'm not
Sure.
there yet. But
We all
even the other day I was sleeping in till 8 a.m. like, and and I was like, oh my gosh, how have I been in bed for 3 hours? And all of a sudden it was the first time ever I had this awareness that I'm like, yeah, I can. Like, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, it is okay. I don't have to wake up or I don't have to be, I like waking up early, but I don't have
sure.
to jump out of bed at 5 a.m. and do a 6 mile run
Mhm.
and drink my whatever, whatever. And like
And
all these,
journal.
yeah, right. Like, I can do whatever feels best for
Yep.
me to live a joyous life. Like, stop with all these like self-imposed rules. And so that's what I mean. But then I haven't taken advantage of my entrepreneurial freedoms because I've been filled with like self-hate and self-criticism
Mhm.
for not optimizing every single moment of every single day, whether it's for personal growth or business strategy or
Yeah.
operations or learning or exercising or nutrition. It's like, go, 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 go.
Yep.
No, just
Yeah.
F off for 3 hours in the
Right.
morning in bed. It's fine.
It's okay. Yeah. And
Yeah.
one of the things I have like taught it as part of like my leadership side of things of what I do within Naker Consulting, my business is like I say like success is a choice, right? So
Yeah.
like you get to individually choose what success means to you. If it's
It's true.
sleeping into 8 and it's working for 2 hours and then fluffing off for 6 hours, it's like
Hmm.
that's your individual success. And nobody
Totally
should
agree.
be able to take that away from you and tell you like you're not successful because you don't wear a suit to work or
Hmm.
because you don't work at the biggest agency in town
Right.
or that you don't have you don't drive a luxury car or a
Right.
Tesla or whatever. It's like,
Right.
well, if that's not success for you, then what does it matter? And if people allow themselves to get that dream of success
Hmm.
hijacked by what
Yeah.
society tells them, what their
Hmm.
parents tell them, or what their spouse tells them, what their friend tells them.
I
And that's why
agree.
success is always an individual choice, you know.
Totally
But so
agree.
we're work in progress though, for sure.
Totally.
Always, all of us are.
Like the person working 2 hours a day, someone's like, you're not successful because you don't work. You don't sit, why, look at a screen for 8 hours. Like everybody, you're so right. Everybody's going to have their own interpretation. And I always say this thing, your intuition is your oracle. Like really tap into what your own truth is.
Mhm.
And then we're all just imperfect humans speaking from a place that is filled with our childhood traumas
Mhm.
and life situations and relationship heartbreak and job gains and losses and like and no one journey is replicable in the same way. So if you read that book and if you think can do every last step in that book and get the same outcome, it's just different timing for different folks. And so
Yeah.
really tapping into your own body's messages and intuitions and or in your case faith and
Mm.
I am a more I believe like in the universe, but I do believe there's like a higher power, right? So
Sure.
like tapping into that and just being being at peace that you are enough and it's okay as long as you're not hurting anybody and as long as you're living like a purposeful life and well intentioned and willing to learn when mistakes are made and we're all just imperfect flawed people.
100%. 100%
Yeah.
all flawed. Well, it's funny. I was listening to I was actually watching the YouTube video that you had posted with those guys that you had met, and there was this interview that you did with them, and you had said in it that in this community that you filled, right, that we are LA Tech,
Yeah.
you kept hearing, especially from women, this
Yeah.
concept of like, I'm not enough. I'm not
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
And I think we all feel that way, but if you maybe want to talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that, because that's a lie, right? We all know
Yeah.
that that's a lie, but we tell
Yeah.
ourselves that lie.
All the time. When I was building my action sports company, I didn't understand how incredible I was. I thought it was impossible that I could know anything. And so I would seek outside sources for validation. People would tell me, "Oh, I know how to do things." I'm like, "All right, let me pay you my new investment money so I could make sure to win because I want to win." And um it's very interesting to me, like, the narratives we have inside of our minds that just aren't true, but we need to do the work to chip away at them. So, like, I've had so many people on the Women in Tech podcast because maybe they speak English in a second language. They're like, oh, I'm not good enough because they just assume because they speak English in a second, their English isn't good enough. There was a time that I spoke Italian fluently, and my roommate was even Italian. But when I got back from living in Italy, I thought my Italian sucked because I was comparing myself to native Italians. So I did not speak any Italian to my Italian roommate, and I lost all of my Italian, and only after I'm like, "Oh, I spoke Italian fluently and could have totally maintained it. I had an Italian roo," like, we just we're always comparing ourselves to someone else, thinking that, not everyone, but I've compared myself to other people thinking, "I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough,
Yep.
I'm not good enough." It's such, my mom says it's saying, "Don't close your own doors of opportunity." Like, let someone else,
Yeah.
say whatever they're gonna say, and even if that person says you're not good enough, then, show up and show them how you are, you know?
Totally. Totally.
There's a great book called Show Your Work I have it over there by Austin Kleon, and
Mm.
it's people are usually looking for just someone, and actually a high level Microsoft exec said this to me too. People are always looking for someone just, 1 or 2 steps ahead because it's closer and more relatable
Mm.
to what you're involved in. So thinking that, like, there's always someone that would love to, learn from you or gain from you or be a part of your network. Like, it's just a matter of, connecting the dots and
Totally.
believing in yourself and leading with heart and the right intent.
Well, it's funny that
Oh,
you
that's
say that.
selfish. I
Yeah.
mean, some
No, but
people
no,
don't.
I get.
But I would like a world where everybody led with heart and the
Yeah,
right
that
intent.
would be great, wouldn't it? You and I both. Somebody like you that has done so many different things and has so much exposure, it's got to be even more pressure because you're the girl that gets things done, right? You're like you're all these things, but if you follow your heart, what fills you with joy,
Yeah.
you will always be the best version of yourself doing.
Totally. My challenge to myself is just consistently being honest with myself of, what works for me and making the difficult choices that don't necessarily go in the grain of society. When I feel this need to go on Twitter or Instagram, if I don't authentically want to go there, it's like a
Mhm.
dopamine drip kind of thing. I'll journal. I'll write. Right now, I feel like going to Instagram. It's like it's calling to me, but I don't actually want to go on Instagram. I'll just talk about what I'm
Right.
experiencing to
Right.
try to break that pattern because I've noticed that I don't actually want to be on there. But society makes you feel like you got to be on these things all the
Yeah.
time. So I've been doing little things like that. One thing that's a little bit, maybe it's cheesy, but vulnerable for me to say, and this is when I stopped to reflect for a second. I was having a conversation with my friend who's verified on Twitter. I'm not verified on Twitter. The bots don't like me. I didn't ask for it when I could have been verified because it was never important to me. But now it's become a thing where verification is this, you have to be verified
Like a
to.
badge of honor, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, and now that Twitter is a lot bigger than it was when I first was a part of the Twitter world,
Mhm.
it's really difficult. At least my journey, it's been very difficult to get verified. Fine. It started to consume me, make me feel that, what the F? Like, I'm
Right.
in Forbes, I'm in, what more do you want from me? I'm an
Mhm.
entrepreneur, I'm an Inc. Like, how many articles do you want me to be in, you
Right.
know? And I started to ask myself, do you even actually care? Like, do you actually, genuinely on the inside care? Like, the truth is, the reason I didn't have it earlier on is because I didn't care. Nothing's changed. I still don't care. But now I feel like society needs that in order for me
Right.
to be relevant in society. Da, 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 da. And I was talking to my friend the other day. So the thing that really moves me is to kind of be a champion for people. It's why I push myself to be so vulnerable online. It's
Sure.
why I created the tweet of like, I don't care if you even have 0 listeners, I'll be a guest on your show. Like, stop judging people on stupid things. Like,
Hmm.
like if someone's mission driven, just be a human. Like, stop
Yep.
saying, oh, do you have 10,000 listens? Do you have 100,000 listens? That's all. Like,
Right.
F off. So
Right.
I was like, look, I don't
Yep.
care if you have 0 listens as long as you have mission.
Yep.
And I was talking to my friend in the DMs who's verified, who got verified in 2013 when he submitted the form, the same form I could have submitted if I had chosen to that day.
Right.
I said, Matt, sometimes I wonder if me not being verified, it empowers me to still be more relatable to everyone, which is so important to me. He's like, I don't think you're wrong because there's something that happens, like some subconscious hierarchy that happens with the verification mark. I do everything that I do because even though I wouldn't say that I'm religious, I'm very connected to like the universal
Mm.
spirit or whatever. I know I want to be good when I'm on the other side. I want to know I lived a purpose driven life and I really am like good on the other side. So everything I do, my podcast, my moral code of how I show up to things, everything is about whoever is watching me. I want them to be proud and I want to be proud of myself. If anyone's watching, and watching as in the universal spirit,
Yep. I get what you mean.
like that, that I lived an honorable life. And part of living an honorable life is that we're all on the same path.
One of the reasons why I've felt kind of like you more called to be louder from a personal brand standpoint, from a social media standpoint, and one of the things that made me want to reach out to you is the
Yeah.
heart-centered approach that you take. And I think that there's confusion. And I used to be confused about this. Like if I wanted to be ultra successful, I wanted to go do this.
Yeah.
There is this like little switch in my head where I couldn't care about all these other things. I just had to go. And everything in
Yeah.
my path would be behind me. Very ego driven, right? Very
Yeah.
status, ego driven.
Mhm.
And one of the things I think is so important, especially people like you, and I laugh when you're saying like maybe I'm not verified for a reason. Like I think you may be right because
You know?
verification is only ego driven, right?
100% agree.
So many people think life is a competition. And if
Mhm.
people stop thinking that life was a competition and they actually understood that helping others is a cheat code and a superpower in life,
Yeah.
we would live in a much better society, right? And that's why people like you and the platform you have,
Yeah.
right? Super successful, but like you're vulnerable about your struggles. You're vulnerable about like, maybe thinking you're not enough all the time, but you are very open about the fact that you're trying to be the best version of yourself and do everything in a heart-centered way.
Mhm.
More people need to continue to hear that because when they hear people
Yeah.
who say that, they start to believe it. And that's what we need.
I do think that we need more heart-driven people, 100%. What I've challenged myself in my own perspectives, whether I have online validation or not, I agree with you so much that it's an ego thing. Like that need that we feel like I want it, I need it, I want it. It's very toxic and
Mhm.
unhealthy. Like and I'm like, why is so much of my energy going to this thing that my ego totally wants it, that my ego, or at least thinks it wants it, because there's other
Yep.
things that could happen. The other
For sure.
thing that I also want, Jason, which is interesting, is I don't have a desire to be famous. So it's interesting, like here my ego's like, I want this thing, but I'm like, I don't even have a desire to be famous. Like, why does this
Right.
thing all of a sudden matter to me so much? And then I'm like, does it actually matter to me? And what I want to challenge myself is just letting go of that toxic motivation. My friend Danny Miranda has a podcast. He's amazing. And he talks about falling in love with the journey. Whatever this universe has in store for me, like it's laid out with the perfect plan for me with a series of learning lessons. And yes, I have to show up for things to happen. I
Mhm.
can't just like sit
Sure.
in my living room and something's
Right.
going to happen. But like everything's placed on my path at certain times for whatever experiences I'm intended to learn from. And for me to like decide to control something, no, the success and the riches need to happen on October 2nd,
Mhm.
this year. Like who am I to decide like what day? If it doesn't happen by that day, I have failed. I'm like, who
Yeah.
said, And
Right.
so I want to surrender to the opportunity to fall in love with the journey. And whether that journey includes whatever social accolade or external, whatever it includes, period.
Mm.
I just want to trust in the journey and then show up and invest my energy into purpose driven important places instead of energy into my ego, energy into how can I serve someone today.
Mhm.
So I think that's what I'm trying to get at. It's just something that I've been reflecting on a lot in the last few months. So it's still like a new idea. So sorry that if I've used too
No,
many
no,
words.
no, that's okay. And I actually have I want to support this with a story. So I've got two girls, right? So I'm a dad
Yeah.
with two daughters, Isabella and Juliana. Isabella is 14 years old. She's a freshman in high school. Juliana
Yeah.
is in fifth grade. She's 10. And they know daddy's got a podcast and I've got a YouTube. And my
Yeah.
10-year-old's been asking me for 2 years if she could have a YouTube channel. My answer is always no. But she's like, Daddy, when can I come on your podcast? And I was like, someday. She's like, well, can I come on today? And she's got a half day of school today. And I
Yeah.
was like, well, as a matter of fact, I'm interviewing a really unique woman today.
Yeah.
So I started explaining who you are. And I started with, she's got tons of followers on Twitter, which she doesn't really know what Twitter is. But I was like, wait a minute, that's not important. And I stopped myself because here I am talking to my daughters who I
Yeah.
want to raise to be confident, educated women that go out and change the world and whatever God has in store for them.
Yeah.
And I started with like this really cool girl who's got 35,000 followers. I
Yeah.
was like, no, wait a minute. Actually, she does all these things. She started her first company here. And I started kind of like rolling out your accolades.
Yeah.
It's like, and they were like, oh, Dad, that's really cool. I was like, she's someone that I admire based on what she's done. She runs in technology. I was kind of explaining to like my 10-year-old, 14-year-old, like even in the tech space, like there's such toxic masculinity sometimes,
Yeah.
right? The bro culture. And I was like, she's killing it in this world and doing so well. And I was like, it's awesome. It just proves that you could do whatever you want to do. And I'm super excited to interview her. And they're like, oh, okay, that's cool, Dad. And I say all of that because I went in with ego.
Yeah.
This,
Yeah.
this awesome girl that's got
Yeah.
30,000 followers to come up
Yeah.
on a podcast.
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute, it's not about that.
Yeah.
It's about this awesome heart-centered person that's doing
Right.
great things in the world.
But it's
that's
our
what ego.
societal conditioning. Yeah, it's very normal. This is the world we do live in today,
Mhm.
and it is our own personal responsibility to remember that our journey being here has nothing to do with any of that. Our journey being here is on a lot higher purpose, and the more we're open to learning from the lessons given to us and evolving and serving, the more we'll feel peace and content. When we create our own resistance, we're just going to experience more resistance.
Yep.
And there's a lot of resistance that I have all the time, as we all have. And so I am just constantly inviting myself to re-explore why I feel what I feel,
Mhm.
why I'm holding on to X anger or why I'm holding on to X need. I'm just always like doing my best to have an honest conversation with myself. And then I'm always pushing myself to share that vulnerable journey publicly only because I am so irritated that everyone is fake. And
Yes.
I'm like, someone's got to be real. We're
Yep.
all just human. We all feel this on the inside.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm feeling like a martyr
Yeah.
syndrome or something,
Yeah.
but I just
Yeah.
feel like someone's got to be real. I do my best to share truths, even if they're uncomfortable truths, but with an empowering
Sure.
position because I want to be empowered too. I don't
Yeah.
want to say XYZ happened to me and now I'm great. That's not true.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
and I don't want to say XYZ happened to me. Oh my gosh, everything was like awful. That's
Right.
not good. But it's like XYZ happened to me. this has been extremely difficult. Here is how I've been processing it. And here's what I hope for myself for the future. And here's what it's just like an empower, just
Yeah.
it's honest, it's authentic, but it leaves on a pathway that has the opportunity to elevate upward.
Yep. And what is really important about that is like what I do and what you do, where we work with potentially founders or clients of tech companies, they're tech companies. Like you can also choose who you want to work with, right?
Yeah.
Like saying no is powerful, right? There's
Mhm.
power in saying no. And
Yeah.
one of the things I didn't do early on in my consultant business, but I do now and say it all the time is like, if somebody wants to talk to me about consulting for the business, I'll be very open and say, I want to meet and I need to get to know you a little bit to find out if it's a right fit for you and a right fit for me. Right.
Right.
Because I always say, like, I don't make magic happen. I work with really good people that have really good ideas and a really good product, and I just put gasoline on the fire. So if
100%.
we're not the right mix, it's going to be okay. And I may even be able to refer you to somebody, but there's so much power in saying no, even when there's money attached, especially when there's money attached, because that's the truest accountability when you're in business. If you're saying
Yeah.
no to money because of a moral compass, you
Yeah.
know you're being led by the right thing, which is your heart. Because there's so many great businesses out there, and don't get me wrong, I want to make money, but like in the same sense, I don't want to do it and feel dirty at the end of the day.
Yeah.
There's a right way and a wrong way to do things, and there's a right way to lead and a wrong way to lead. So, can you any experiences you have like in this like big world that you live in, especially in
Yeah.
LA with dealing with like all these tech founders, have you ever found yourself having to say no to anybody or walk away from an opportunity?
Yeah, so I walked away from an opportunity at the beginning of the pandemic, which was really interesting. But before I share that, I wanted to share one more thing about the thing
Sure.
with your daughter, which I love that you shared that story. Sometimes we'll see in headlines like so and so pass with 1 million followers passes away, and I'm like, how terrible. So I wrote out my one liner in my obituary, and it said, something like Espree, like a heart-driven person, always looking to elevate community or something,
Mhm.
more
Yeah.
eloquent than that.
Yeah.
But it had nothing about like follower count. So I just
Right.
think that's such a shame that that's
Mhm.
how, as a society, we're all conditioning one another.
Right.
So and that we have to work that much harder to untrain what the media is telling us to do. And
Mhm.
and yeah.
Yeah.
An opportunity I walked away from. So, it was at the beginning of the pandemic. It was so hard. I was producing a podcast for a large brand, and it didn't feel right for me anymore. Like, it just didn't feel right, and they wanted to, like, renew,
Mhm.
and I was just like, "Mm, it just doesn't feel right." But it's like walking away from money,
Yep.
you're, like, watching the news that a recession's about to happen, and I'm like, "What am I, out of my mind?" It's not like
Right.
I had, like, uh, bazillions of reserves. I just feel that if I do this, I'd be doing it only for the money, not because I wanted to, and it would deplete me energetically from
Mhm.
being able to actually pursue the life that I wanna be living. It took me like a month to make the decision. It was so hard to like walk away from the
Yeah.
money. So hard. But in the end, not only did I walk away from the money, I also gave them assets and pointed them in the direction of like people to work with.
Mhm.
And I think I called it a success document. No one asked
Yeah.
me for it. My mom thought I was crazy to even create it. but like, but it just felt like it was in line with my ethics and how I operate in
Yeah.
the world. And so I created this. I even get handed over the music, which I didn't have to do. A lot of people charge a lot of
Sure.
money for music.
Sure. Sure.
Um, and then I went on. Anyway, they did end up going with the people I recommended, and then that company, out of the generosity of their heart, without any expectation, sent me like thank you money, like out of
Wow.
nowhere. Um, and for me, like, that moment, that, like, full circle moment was like, yeah, I made the right
That's where it's
choice,
at.
like, you know?
Totally.
So,
Totally.
yeah, there's tests. I think there's different stages. I think, of course, I don't know you life, but making an assumption, like, I think you and I are really lucky that we have a roof over our head, that we
Mhm.
have food.
Yep.
These are things not everybody has. So, I think there's different levels. There's the survival level, But, like, to survive, hopefully you could even find, like, I've been a dishwasher before, I've been a graveyard waitress. So hopefully you could find those, like, starting jobs,
Yep.
like, and start saving and get yourself into a place. And I know all of that is really hard, but especially in this kind of like crazy world that we live in now. But like to the best of your ability, sleep on couches, live with your parents, whatever it needs to be to like get yourself to like a place and be really open minded to opportunity, create a mind of like abundance and intention and
Mhm.
just fill your mind with positives because I really believe we track to what we are. I remember I was really upset somewhere and I kept repeating the mantra, light attracts light, light attracts light, light
Yep.
attracts light. And it's
Does.
because I wanted light within me to attract light. And I was feeling such darkness. I'm like, no, light,
Yep.
light, light attracts light. If I want
It,
more light,
yeah.
I need to be light, you know?
It's yeah, it's the name of this. I mean, it's why I named the podcast The Company We Keep Podcast, because the company
Yeah.
you keep says everything, right? It's like the people
Hmm.
you will it's the people you allow to speak into you. It's
Yeah.
I always say like you have to protect what you see, what you
Yeah.
hear, what you put in your mouth and what comes out of your mouth.
Yep.
Because if you don't have using your example, if you don't have light inside, light
Yeah.
is not coming out. If you're dark inside, dark comes out of your mouth.
Hmm.
And you have to we live in a world where we're connected and distracted all day long, right?
Yeah.
You have to protect what you consume, right? Because if
Mhm.
you want to be surrounded by light, you have to be filled with it, right? So you have
Mhm.
to surround yourself with the people that you know are going to hold you accountable to
Yes.
speak light as well. Because
Yes.
there's a lot of frauds, there's a lot of false prophets out there, right? They say one
Oh,
thing and then they do
drive me
another,
crazy.
right? And that's where when you just say that like light is light, like that's exactly what we need to do. And
Yeah.
people that have platforms, even my platform, it's like
Yeah.
if you put good out there and one person hears it, it's like
Mhm.
that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And
Totally.
and I just commend you for because you've been doing it a while, right? Like you've been grinding for 8, 9 years in podcasting. Like it's a grind, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to remember that we're all silent mentors. So even if we're walking down the street and we go into a store and we choose to smile at the person and look the cash register in the eye and say thank you and please, we all have the opportunity to be silent mentors all day long in our normal
Yeah.
life without changing anything except our light. And here's a quick story. I hope it's interesting. I was feeling. I don't know if you're familiar with Michael Singer, Untethered Souls.
Yes. Yes.
He's a really inspiring author to me. And so I was listening to a podcast interview or something, and I was driving, and I was feeling very. I'm in a very introverted chapter of my life, and I was feeling very like I want to talk to people.
Okay.
I saw one parking spot and I decided to take another parking spot that was just, like, easier to park in. I
Sure.
parked my car. The last words that Michael Singer had said that I was, like, listening to on this audio thing was, that we have the power to change the world or something like that. Um, like, our actions can change the world. And so I park the car. I get out of the car, and then someone with a bigger car is trying to park in that first spot that I left.
Okay.
Now, I don't wanna talk to people. I
Right.
do not
Right.
wanna talk to anybody. So I keep walking, and in my head, I'm like, "It's free. This is your opportunity to be light." I was like, "I don't wanna talk to people." And, like and I get a little bit further on, and I keep hearing this, "You have an opportunity to change the world. You have an opportunity to be light right now." I was like, "Oh." So I ran back as the person is, like, struggling. They're, like, driving away. So I ran back, like, chasing their car, like, "Hey," I was like and they were probably startled, like, you know?
Who's chasing after?
Yeah.
Right.
And I was like, "I parked right there. I'm happy to switch with you." And the woman was in disbelief.
Yeah.
Then we did, and I was like, "Huh." I was like, it's that easy just to take that
Yes.
moment to be
Mhm.
light in the world
Yep.
for yourself and for someone else, it can truly change the world the more of us that show up that way.
100%. And that is, I know we're coming to a close on our time, but like it's something that I commend you for because you do have a platform. You do have a platform worldwide, but also like where you're growing in LA. Like everyone's got their own opinions about LA, right?
Yes.
Like continuing to put out these messages is going to make the next founder or the next creator be like, you know what? She could do it that way. I could do it that way. Because deep
Yeah.
down, I think most of us all want to do what's right. Honestly, I feel I'm so thankful that you spent time with us today because this is like a business and life podcast, but like this drives everything else.
Mhm.
Like being a heart-centered leader, being a heart-centered person, wanting to put light out in the world that
Yeah.
at times can be really dark is exactly the message that people need to hear. And you've been super gracious with me with your time, with your
I
story.
feel lucky to be on your show. You
Yeah,
made it
it's been awesome.
an honor.
And honestly, like this is step one of us, building this friendship. Like
Totally.
I really have enjoyed you.
Yeah.
You've been an absolute delight. And I know my listeners are gonna absolutely love you. So
Yeah.
if you wouldn't mind, like what is the best way people could follow you or everything will be tagged in the show notes, but
Yeah.
where's your main platform that you like to act on?
Sure. I am at Espree Devora on all social. And if
Okay.
you want to email me, it's espree@hey.com. So that's just ESPREE at HEY.com.
Awesome. You're the best. And I just wish you all the luck in the world, what you're doing out there. When
Thank
I come out
you.
to LA, I'm gonna shoot you a DM and tell you I'll be
Yeah,
there so we
you
can have a
should.
cup of coffee. Uh,
I feel lucky. I feel so lucky. I'm not saying that to be polite or nice. I feel so lucky to have had the opportunity to be on your show, like, and had this conversation with you. Like, I feel like we're both like bouncing light off of one another
yeah,
right now.
absolutely. And I love that. I love that. And there's gonna be, including my daughters, there's gonna be a lot of people that listen to this that are gonna love this episode. So
Oh, yay.
thank you so much. Just keep doing what you do out there. Keep spreading light. It's awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, it's free. I appreciate it. Appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. All right. Thanks everybody again for listening to this awesome episode. Hope you were taking notes. Hope you enjoyed it. I know it's a little longer than normal, but there's so many nuggets of great information that Espree shared with us that I didn't want to cut it down any further. So thank you so much for listening. If you are looking to connect with Espree at all of her contact information for all of her socials is going to be linked to this episode in the show notes on my website at jasonmpearl.com. So go there and check all of that stuff out. Also, go into whatever type of podcast listening device you have, whatever site that you use for it, and follow and subscribe to Women in Tech podcast. It's an awesome podcast. I've listened to a number of episodes. You're going to learn a ton. So as we transition onto this episode, if you are a business owner or a leader and you're looking for help going through situational problems or looking for situational based advice, on my website, jasonmpearl.com, I have opened up 45 and 90-minute coaching sessions for you to reach out to me and work through very specific problems. If that's something that interests you, go check out my website and click through that to get in contact with me. Thanks again for keeping me company during this awesome episode today. I'm Jason Pearl. This is the Company We Keep podcast. Until next time, I'm out. Peace.